Hey guys, and welcome to this new LFM season's license guide. Thanks to LFM for having me one more time, and I hope we'll have a lot more new members taking it through the license and right into LFM for the next season. For that, this time we are going to Misano, which is a very technical track, but also one where you will certainly already learn quite a bit that you can then take into your first actual races, so it's a very good choice. Before we get into it, what is the actual time you will need to achieve? Right now the record is 31.895. That means the target time you'll have to achieve on average is 138.328. So let's just assume 138 low, which is roughly 6.5 seconds slower than what the pros are doing. So I would say, of course, this is not a lot, but of course I also know that a lot of you are initially challenged by that, so I want to help you around, just get you there faster. Enough of the waffling, let's just go right into it. Whenever the camera fails there, here I'm back. Of course we're going to use some data with that, and of course I have made a data pack this time with the S13 because I've been driving it quite a bit, but because also it's quite a good beginner's car. And I've made a specific setup for those going with a license that's much more safe than all the esports or competitive setups or fast lap time setups, just for you to have a bit of a, kind of headache-free session to acquire your license, actually. So when you get that data pack, you will have a race setup, a quality setup, and the license setup, so to say, which is set up way more on the safe end of the spectrum, and it cost me roughly 1 second of lap time. So it's in the end not even that much slower, but it's like ultimately, it's let's say 10 times more stable to drive and more predictable for you and much less error prone. So really suggest to take something like that if the aggressive preset for whatever reason, or the safe preset for whatever reason, is not suitable, as they have not been updated in a very long time. I think we should start with a game, and a couple specifics about Misano are probably best shown if we zoom out a bit. We can see that there are often not a lot of straights between the corners, right? So if we take a look at turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, they are all so-called connected corners, which means they are affected by one another. So when we think about turn 3, it's going to be influenced by turn 2, and turn 2 is in turn going to be influenced by turn 1. So when they are all connected, this also means when they kind of influence each other, also means turn 1 is still going to affect turn 3. And the thing we want to think about mainly when doing or learning a track is that we want to find these places that are the ones we want to put the focus on, and from where we want to work through a section. And why am I all saying this? Why am I highlighting this? Because the normal approach for beginners will be, well, I'm braking for turn number 1 here, and then let's see how that goes, right? And you're kind of looking at turn 1 in isolation, but it would be much better if you started looking at these kind of micro sections here. I think the sectors ACC does is not really suitable here. I think the first sector time is somewhere here or so. I don't really know. And that's a way too big area to really kind of make a comparison with. So on the Popometer website with the data, I also made sectors that make much more sense to analyze as a unit, and the same way we're going to do this here with the track guide we're doing, or the license guide we're doing. So turn 1 to 3 are a unit, and in this special case there's a bit of straight here, and our target in this first section is to take turn 3 as fast as possible. The pro guys will be flat out through turn 3, or almost flat out, mostly flat out, or tiny lift, ideally flat out. And that means already making compromises in turn 2 and turn 1. So what I'll need you to do here is be able to think a bit abstract, because actually the map is turned around, so maybe we should have it kind of the same way here. That would be almost the same view. There we go. And what I want you to have a look at, just before there's any driving really, and before we figure out the track limits and all that, just the focus you want to put in this section is that you can see in the color here representing green means the car is on throttle, or the driver is on throttle, and you can really see as I go through this turn 3 right-hander, I'm basically full throttle the entire way, except for the small part here initially or so, but other than that, it is flat. And this is going to give you a lot of lap time, and I focus so much on this because in turn, when there's a lot of lap time to gain, there's also a lot of lap time to lose, which makes achieving the license very hard. So, and how do we actually get into a position to take this flat out? This means we'll have to leave a bit of room here on the exit coming out of turn 2. This means for that to be a possibility, we ideally have a bit of a turn-in position into turn 2 that allows us to still carry speed, but also not easily max out on the track exit there. And this in turn means we also have to consider that already in turn 1, where we try to not go too wide after going through turn 1, but keep the car somewhat in the middle of the track. Okay, this mostly means when we don't want to run wide that we have to take out more speed, right? You could easily take a line that is much faster here, but then you end up in this position. You've probably done turn 1 faster, you gained a bit of time there, but then as you go on for turn 2, now you have to brake a lot. Or if you don't brake for turn 2, you're going to go wide out of turn 2 and you will not be able to turn 3 flat out again, right? So it's all about the compromises here, and I talk so much about that because on Misano, that is the thing in several corners and several sections. So this pattern is kind of going to repeat doing the correct compromise to gain lap time where it's actually available. Okay, now if we take it back to the car and we're going into the chase cam, I'm just going to walk you through here. The other major thing on Misano is that the track limits are very lenient. You can see already where I'm braking, and this is probably the first way to lose a lot of lap time is by sticking entirely to the tarmac, because that means if you're braking on the tarmac, you're going to be a full car width further to the right, if your car is here. Then this means you're giving up a lot of potential extra position, which in turn allows you to go much faster through the corner. And since this goes through the entire track, you will easily, even if you would drive perfectly, if you limit yourself by the tarmac, you'll automatically easily be 2 seconds off the pace or something just by not using that track. It's simply not possible to be as fast when you're using less track. So the first thing on Misano you'll have to figure out is the track limits, and it's really very important. I'll mention it in every single corner how far you can go. So that is the first thing here, is where the braking is. You probably don't have to figure out the exact braking point that I'm using. I'm just trying to give you references, and good references in ACC. So I assume you're new. When you're new to LFM, you're new to ACC. A good reference for the braking points is always where the ideal line starts getting darker, right? If we fly around here, go to the middle of the start finish straight, you'll see everything is pretty much gray. And then if we move further into the braking zone, you can see the track is getting darker here, with the ideal line indicating there's more rubber put down because there's more energy put into the track, pretty much because someone is hitting the brakes, right? So if we are watching my car here, where I have placed it, then it's just, kind of a tiny bit into the black stuff where I will start hitting the brakes here. So in this case, you could almost use the marker where better to see from the outside here. Right, you can see the ideal line getting more black, and then when it reaches full width, or when the ideal line touches the curb again, this is usually something good to look at while driving. Another option would just be between the 50 and 100 meter board. Whatever works for you is fine. I think there are also white lines here. The car's probably above it right now. There's a white line from the 100 meter board, and there's another white line for the 50 meter board. And well, in the middle is not quite correct. This is probably an 80 meter braking point or something like that. Okay, so plenty of references to work with. And now the key is to get rid of a lot of speed and then making sure we are approaching the next corner in a way that we can cut it a lot. And now there's the next information I'll give you. How much track can you actually use here? And you'll see the same pattern. It's very typical for Misano that the track limits are not actually this white line, okay? The actual track limit is probably here alongside the edge of the curb. So the rule is that 2 tires always need to be on track, and in this case on track means in this area still to the left of the dotted line. That is the key here, and you will see just how you can later do the comparison. You'll be able to see this by how much we're cutting here, okay? Because what we do on the website is the white line here represents the white line here, right? And that's why it looks like we're cutting the track entirely there, which is kind of true, but it's still within the track limits, even if it's not within the track white line. Gotta ask, who knows why they did it, but I assume it's down to Misano racetrack handling the track limits like that. Can argue why they make the curb as whites and then put sausage curbs and all that, but something for a different video. And the other thing is, you'll see the braking is done. We're just rolling a bit here, and now it's almost important to have the patience before you go back on power, because as I said earlier, we don't really want to go wide here. We want to end up in the middle of the track to still have a turn-in position for the left-hander. So this means we're going to roll it forward here and just making sure how wide we go after that corner, okay? And if we just view this here, you'll see there's pretty much an equal amount of space from the left side of the track from the car and to the right side of the track. So we're maybe a tiny bit further to the left or something, but just imagine you're aiming for the middle of the track. But again, you could easily just follow where ACC paints the ideal line, right? And if you zoom out, you can easily see where the dark patches are. And this is a very good reference where you want to be in a lot of places here. The next thing, and again, this is going to be track limits. If we roll it forward, turning in here, again, same issue, that the game allows you to use a lot of track. And you will, as I said earlier, you lose a lot of time if you don't do that. So you have to figure out a way to find your comfort with it. And again, it's the same thing as before, that we have the white line going along here, but the actual limit being somewhere between the rain gutter and where the curb is here. So this is where you want to place your outside tires, ideally, just taking a much shorter line, much faster line at the end of the day, and also giving you a better position on corner exit, and then again having a better run through turn 3. The next problem you're getting here is, and that's why I'll pay special attention to that. That's the wrong camera, actually. We got to fly out of the car a bit. You'll have the issue that you're going to go across these sausages, and they do have a tendency to upset the car and make it a little unstable. So the other thing you're going to see is down here, we want to use the throttle here a bit to stabilize the car. What this does is, as you apply some power, and it's going to be pretty much the same in all the cars, I guess, is that when the car is on power, it's not leaning too much onto the front tires, it's putting some weight back onto the rear tires, and overall making the car a tiny bit more stable. And when the car is more stable, you will also be able to kind of clip those sausages without being harmed as much, right? Even when the car is stable, it goes over a bump, it's still going to remain stable. If the car's already oversteery, you hit a bump, it might get even more oversteery. If the car's understeery, you hit a bump, it gets even more understeery. So when the car is neutral, which you can achieve with a bit of throttle here, just to kind of keep the speed stable, meaning the car is neither decelerating nor accelerating, just a stable speed usually means the car is in a very steady, calm position, able to take external inputs like such a sausage here, then you'll be much more able to mitigate those curbs without suddenly the car changing attitude, changing position, jumping wide, being pulled to the inside, the rear braking loose, and all sorts like that. And you'll also see this here during, sorry, was actually the wrong place, here. This, right, we just go over these sausages, and then you'll see pick up the throttle, but just to kind of keep the speed stable. You'll see this up here. the speed just staying pretty much the same throughout this turn. And this is what the throttle really does, is stabilizes the car. It's not actually a means of acceleration in this phase. This only happens once the car leaves the curb again. And once we're off the sausages, we know there's no further impact that can come towards the car. So we put the power down more aggressively and get it to rotate and accelerate from the corner. The next thing that we want to watch out, and this is just something that you'll learn as you go along. Every time you find yourself in a very wide position here, like say you wouldn't have these 1-2 meters towards the outside curb, but actually be much closer, this will tell you you need to take turn 2 slower. And if turn 2 already felt slow, you probably have to take turn 1 slower in order to be in a better position for turn 2, which will make turn 3 better as well. Okay, then the idea is here, again, as I said earlier, to take turn 3 flat. So if the more room you leave here, the more easy it will become to turn 3 flat. And your target is to kind of not have it too easy and not too impossible to take it flat, right? Then you get the feeling for when it's perfect. So if turn 3 is too easy to take flat out, you feel like you're not even on the limit of the car, and it essentially could go faster if you were able to build more speed, then you probably had to turn in position from here, right? And if you have the feeling you cannot take turn 3 flat, then you probably had a position somewhere here. And so the compromise you want to find is that it's just about possible to stay flat out, and that's very likely a position where I am right now, or for, like, let's say the more beginner you are, the more rookie you are, the more time you still need to pick up pace, the wider you want to put the turn in position to the left here, the easier it becomes to take turn 3 flat. If, however, you end up in this position, you can play with the car a bit, you can play its weight to your advantage a bit, and what you'll see here is a very aggressive turn in to the right in order to kind of upset the rear end, because at that speed, downforce is already playing a role. We have aggressive throttle put down. And what happens in these cars is that the differential locks. This means both rear tires, they are going to spin at the same speed. And this prevents the car from rotating nicely, right? You have to imagine when the rear tires can spin more independently, right? One tire can spin faster than the other. That's difficult to convey. Then it's easier for the car to rotate because the outside tire is allowed to cover a greater distance in the same amount of time, which means the car is going to rotate. And once you're on full power, which you can see here, and we have a chart especially for that you can see if the car is willing to rotate or not, basically. This is the differential in rear wheel speed. And every time the line is 0, that means the rear tires are, from the differential, locked together and the car will have a very hard time rotating. And every time this shows a value, I don't know, in this case here, it's 5, 6, 7 or something, one tire is spinning quite a bit faster than the other. And you will usually have that in braking zones in the corners is where you're going to see the differential opening, allowing the car to rotate. Right? And the differential is not an electronic one. It doesn't look at your steering angle or something. It is only affected by the power put into the differential from the engine of either coasting or accelerating. But we're taking this way too far here. The idea you want to take away is if you're full power, the car is rather stable. And if you're off the throttle, the car becomes slightly unstable in order to help you go through the corner. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have tons of understeer in corners and the car just doesn't want to go, maybe check your right foot if there's too much power applied, because that will lock the differential and doesn't actually allow you to rotate. Anyway, let's take it further. Here, now we are full throttle, which means the car is rather stable and has a difficult time turning, which is why we're doing the whole preparation for the position here. And the other bit is being very aggressive on turn-in into turn 3. You can already see the same issue with the track limits here. We can cut this corner a lot. As usual, behind the white line, just where the curb ends or goes towards the entirely red stuff. And what I want you to see here is the speed at which I change direction in the steering. And this is really here. So between turn 2 and turn 3, you'll see me, so coming out of turn 2, turning left, we are very aggressive turning the car to the right, right? In a very short period of time, I'm really cranking the rear aggressively to the right because that upsets the rear and gives us that tiny bit of axle rotation that is normally prevented here by the differential and the downforce, right? So every time you're full throttle and have a bit of speed, the car is stable and you can be aggressive and throw it around. And this way you can take that corner faster at the end of the day. Let's move forward a bit. And now you'll start seeing all the things that we already mentioned. We've laid a lot of groundwork. They will start to repeat. First thing here, the next breaking point, usually where the grass or sand start here, that is somewhat of a good marker. Probably you want to be a bit earlier. See, I'm already quite a bit on the brakes here. If we're watching it from the outside, inside the cockpit, it feels like we're already a couple meters into the sand here. So if we just roll it back ever so slightly, you can see my brake just starts before, let's say, the grass here is in line with my bonnet or with a windshield, whatever you want to use. This is your rough marker, right? And then you behave towards that ever so slightly earlier, later, whatever. This is what you can work to and what you can behave towards. Let's say in the external camera here, move it forward, and now we get the same issues again as we have everywhere else. There is a lot of track to use, so we do the same thing here again. The car really needs to be fully on that curb, and you'll also feel the curb will grab the car in a weird way. And if we zoom in a little here, maybe you can get an idea why as well. We can probably change this. By the way, if you want to do that, you press the F7 key to go to kind of the drone camera, if you want to call it that. You can fly around with the arrow keys and use your mouse to change the camera, and you use the mouse wheel to adjust the speed you're flying with. And if you press the middle mouse, this menu on the left here will come up, and then you can change the focal length, because the closer you zoom in, the more you'll be able to see the shape of the track. And now if we fly along here, you can see that the track is definitely going down towards that curve there, and there's definitely a bit of a valley, and that means when you're going through here, that valley, the shape of the track is going to just affect the car. That's why I want you to be your takeaway here. The shape of the track, the angle of the track, the banking of the track, that is going to affect how the car behaves. So the more you go to the inside, your outside tires will be somewhat in this banking here, and that will mean there's just a bit more grip available than if the track was flat. That's the entire idea. The other bit is, what else can we see if we go for turn 4 to 6 here? And just by seeing how many corners I put together, you will be able to tell, okay, they probably form a unit again. So by the time we are braking for turn 4 here, we want to already think about turn 5, but even more so about turn 6, because now if we zoom out a bit, you can see after turn 6, there's, a long straight. Probably, was it the longest one? Probably not, but the second longest straight on that circuit. So there's a lot of time to gain on that straight if you actually go along there fast. And in order to be fast on the straight, well, we need a good exit here, okay? And you're gonna lose a lot of time onto that straight if your turn-in position is from here, which you can easily end up if you think, well, let's go fast through this corner, right? And whatever you do here is going to be irrelevant, but that corner, if you go too fast through turn 5, then you're going to end up wide here, and you're going to be really, really slow through turn 6, have to slow down a lot here, and you're going to miss 20, 30 kilometers onto the straight, and that is easily worth 1, 2, 3 seconds. Time is extremely intolerant, so to say, to mispositioning the car here. So your main idea is to be as much to the right as you can manage here in turn 6, right? So let's actually roll this backwards. We go forward a couple seconds. This is the turn-in position that we're aiming for. I'm even a bit far here. This is where we want to end up, okay? In the very wide position here before turn 6. And then how we get there basically is by, okay, let's maybe not go too wide after turn 5 here. How do we manage that? By coming from a very wide position here after turn 4. So if we go the section back the entire way, then we can already tell, okay, if that is our target, what do we have to do under braking? Which speed do we have to be? Where do we want to end up? So we're planning this whole thing a tiny bit different. So if you look at the speed trace, we're slowing down here. And let's see where the slowest point in the corner is. So it's 82 here, 81, 78, 77, 76. We're pretty much the slowest after the first apex. And we do have some visualization of that as well. And I'm going to introduce you to these track marks that I feel could become very handy for you when you're later in the comparison, just to see what you're doing right or wrong. You basically can ignore the entire input stuff when you focus entirely on these track marks that we have. The purple one always shows you where the car is the tightest. The blue one always shows you where the car is the slowest. And once you do the comparison, you'll see, is your slowest point in the corner much later? Is it much earlier? Is your apex at the same place, so where the car is actually the tightest or the most inside in that corner? These are the marks you can kind of entirely work with, because the slowest point means you slow down until then, you accelerate from there. Apex means you go tighter until there, you go wider from there. And just with that in mind, you will probably be able to figure out a lot of things already. So when we're the slowest after the turn, just means if we would already be accelerating, where are we going to accelerate to, right? If we start accelerating here, where are we going to go? There's no track to use, right? And if we go there, probably issues start and we end up somewhere there. We don't want that. So this kind of automatically results in the slowest speed kind of being after the corner, because we can't use any additional speed here. And we are really targeting this wide position here and this, well, yeah, wide or tight position. Depends on which corner you look. It's tight if you look at turn 5. It's wide if you look at turn 6. Okay, but these are the points that we are targeting. So the wider you are here, the better of a radius you will be able to drive to turn 5, and the more tight you will stay to the right here for turn 6. So you will see me in the speed or in the throttle trace now that we have in the chart here on the left. You will see I have to kind of work with a lot of patience here with the throttle, right? It's some throttle applied, but that's mainly down to the S10's turbocharger. You can put like 70-80% throttle without much happening, and only in the last 20% of the pedal you will have the entire power output of the engine. And that's what I feel can confuse people a lot in ACC, because a lot of the turbo cars, not all, the worst is the Aston, then the BMW, I think, the Nissan potentially has that, where the turbocharger has kind of all the power compressed in the last 20% of the throttle pedal, so you can use a lot here before anything happens. But this also means you only have the small range in the pedal to adjust all the power and play with it, and that's what this throttle trace here reflects. Okay, we're just trying to be in that spot where the turbo is just about to release all the power, and then we can manage around those corners. But again, we are aiming for those wide points here and the tight point here, and that's where all the hesitation in the pedal really comes from, to keep the car tight around turn 5, to keep it in the right position, because that opens up turn 6, and then you can see I'm actually flat through turn 6 here, and then I carry a lot of speed onto the straight, and that's where the lap time comes from. So how does it look inside the car? Let's if I find my mouse again, we can remove the markers. So from here we will have managing of the throttle going on. I'll have it at half speed. You see the throttle is never full here, just waiting, more patience, bringing the car to the inside, waiting still, and then a slight lift here on turn in, right? Just opening up that differential real quick. I'll show you again. This is a very nice thingy. You can see this here, rear wheel differential. This is enough to give the car a bit of initial rotation into the corner. You go off the throttle, the differential opens, the outside tire is allowed to spin faster than the inside tire. That creates the rotation in the car, and that impulse already, that is enough to take the corner, right? So the timing here is crucial. There's the turn in, then you figure out what the car is doing, it's loading up the outside tires, and when you feel, okay, now I need the rotation, you just open up the throttle here a bit. That creates the rotation. And once you feel that, and you will, right? You go off the throttle, the car starts rotating, you feel this, like that reaction is coming from the car. then you can go back into the power immediately. And it needs to be aggressive in the S10 because of the turbocharger needing some time, which you could see in this chart here, right? You're full throttle, but the turbocharger has some delay until the power is actually released. So you kind of have to plan that into all your driving, right? If you put the power down, is not when you're going to have the power. It's tiny bit afterwards, right? So you have to predict, I want the power in 2/10. So you have to already start applying full throttle here. Anyway, the key for you is this throttle lift. That's creating the rotation you need. And that's how you go through that corner. And same thing with the track limits here. Cut all the way, slightly behind the white line, but not behind that curb that's just kind of centered under the car here. And then on exit, we have to take care of it. We can't go too wide. The S10 is not a fan of those sausage curbs here when the outside tires are loaded, because the car is very close to the ground already, and the front splitter has a tendency to just crash into those sausages. So it worked out this time, but probably for your license run, don't go as far. Let's go further. Finally, the first corner on the track where we kind of have an individual corner where there's no other corner influencing it. The break point is that 100-meter board pretty much. Let's slow it down. You'll see, yeah, just before the 100-meter board, I'm already starting to apply the throttle. In cockpit, it always feels a bit later. But be sure, once the white line is in line with your bonnet, you definitely want to be on the brake. Probably when you're a rookie, when you're just going for the license, do it a tiny bit earlier. It's not going to hurt, okay? And then for that corner, this is a very special again. And earlier we talked about banking playing a role. And if we go for turn 7, we'll see the same pattern again. You can already tell it a bit from the cockpit perspective here, that the car or the corner is a bit banked to the inside. So there's a bit more speed available than you would normally have in a corner of that radius if the track was perfectly flat. The other thing is, again, Misano special, the track limits. Again, we want to cut across that white line. It's very important. And the next thing that happens here is, and I'm not sure we can actually see this, well, we might be from this perspective, is that pretty much in the middle of the corner, the car, or let's say the slope of the track until the middle of the corner, or let's say 1/3 into the corner or something, generally the profile is that you go downhill up until here, and pretty much from here you will go uphill again. Okay, and just when you come into this uphill part, that is the tricky spot that you need to watch out for here, because once it goes uphill, your front tires will be the first to notice. Once it goes uphill, the front tires will regain some grip, and that will usually set the rear end loose. And that is again why in that corner we are going to be on the throttle quite early. If we look at it from this perspective again, let's remove my art. You can see we're going into the corner, and quite early on we have the slowest point in the corner here, because once the kind of the uphill slope that's grabbing the front end, suddenly you get a lot of rotation on the inside curb there, add the banking, the curb dragging you in a bit. So the slowest point in that corner is actually here in the kind of first third somewhere, though the apex in the corner where we're the tightest is pretty much in the middle of the turn. And with the early throttle application here, we are really just kind of countering the effect we are getting from the slope of the track changing from downhill to uphill. And just in that valley again, the front end is going to bite and get grip. And with applying power, we are stabilizing the car again here, even though in this one we're much more aggressive than we were in turn 2, where we did the same idea, stabilizing the car over the sausages. Now we're stabilizing the car through kind of the banking and slope changes of the track here. The other problem is, with the S10, we have the issue with the turbocharger. We need to have the power applied before we actually want to have it. So we are on power just to bring up the turbocharger, because you can see here turbo is very low. We put the power down aggressively, but the turbocharger still has delay, and even if we hold it on 80% throttle, no turbo power is increasing here, right? It takes the turbo to spin up quite a long time, and only if we go fully into the throttle here, look how long the turbocharger takes to really boost. And that's really when you want to have power. And that's why the S10 sometimes is tricky on corner exits, because all the power will very suddenly come to the rear wheels. You stomp on the power, you're like, well, nothing happens. 21, 22, and bang, suddenly it's all there. It makes it really tricky to handle. So just understand that, be on the lookout for, you can hear that when the RPM suddenly starts increasing much faster, then you know, okay, this is now when the power is deployed. Anyway, so we're talking about stabilizing the car here into the apex pretty much, because we're mitigating the slope change of the track, and also because after the corner it is going uphill. Every kilometer we're missing is going to hurt badly climbing that tiny bit of a hill here. On exit, same thing. We can use a lot of track, so you can see again putting it behind the white line, but don't go behind the curb here onto the whatever red painted whatever it is. Moving further, repositioning to the left, and get it done early, because for the next corner, which is a really tricky one, and we'll have that in the telemetry 2, turn 8 and 9, we kind of have a very weirdly shaped section here. And I'm showing you this from above first because I think it gives you a better idea what we're targeting and why we're going so wide here. You could always take a tighter line, of course. Shorter line is a faster line in general, but then you get the issue. Let me actually paint that of, let's say you're not aggressively repositioning, right? You just stay here, have the tighter line, save a few meters. Now the problem when you hit the brakes is you'll have a lot of rotation still to do, and you're probably going to turn in from this position or something. The problem is the track here on the outside is going to be very slippery. There are marbles, and we can't really turn in from the very wide position without loads of practice to really know each centimeter of the track and how much grip it gives you. So the best idea for now is to just stay away from the marbles, because they make your experience very inconsistent, and sometimes you'll make the corner, sometimes you won't. The other bit is when you have to do much cornering while braking, the front tires are easily overwhelmed and the ABS is going to interfere, and you're suddenly going to lock a tire and you're just going to go straight. So what we are trying to achieve is here, and I'm going to kind of paint this in an idealized way, we go to the very outside here to somewhat build a straight line into the braking zone, right? So we go, ideally we would go here, and then we put a straight braking line here until the turn-in point. But because the more straight we're braking, the more aggressive we can be on the brake. So the target is to have somewhat of a straight line, or as straight as possible, right? This is as straight as possible. It's not perfectly straight because, well, that's just a situation the corner offers us, but we're trying to straighten up our line under braking, which makes our life a lot easier. That is the target, okay? And then yes, there is a lot of trail braking going into the corner, because it takes a long time to actually approach that exit, and it's very slippery here, and we're losing all the downforce in the process, and the front tires only have so much grip available, right? And if you take away downforce, the available front grip gets less, so you have to reduce that on the brake. But also, as you increase your turning angle, you're using the available grip in a different way, and whatever you want to use in terms of steering, you will have to give up in terms of braking. Just imagine a direct connection between your steering and your braking, and whenever you kind of add to one, you have to release on the other, right? Do more braking, less steering, more steering, less braking, for example. So back to the car, and then trying to highlight if I get access to my mouse here again. There we go. Just going a bit back, showing you the repositioning here, and then aggressive turn in to somewhat build a straight line now. Okay, aggressive initial turn in, and then build a diagonal line middle through that corner, and trying to get into a somewhat wide position, follow the black lines a little bit that are already on the track. And for this corner, same thing as everywhere in Misano, we want to clip that curb a lot and really want to go with all fours onto the curb. And I feel like it's rather late in the corner when we are really fully on that curb here, because again, we have a long straight afterwards, and ideally you could say for the license track or for the license run, for example, you just want to make sure you have a good straight. you don't really have to worry about the corner, because on the straight you're going to lose much more time. So you could in theory even take a wider entry here just to make sure you have a good exit, right? The more straight your exit, the easier it is to build speed, the easier you'll gain time on the straight, because it's the most easy way to lose time is in these early exit phases here, right? So put a late apex in that corner. That's going to help you massively to achieve the lap time. Moving forward to one of the trickier corners on the track, because now suddenly we are approaching at very high speed. And the first thing you're going to see is I'm going to stay very wide here, right? This last kind of kink here, we don't want to cut the inside there because it causes problems. And I want to show you that from this perspective. Again, so this is where the car is right now in the video, pretty much here. Well, somewhere here or so. And of course you could take the tight line here. How do I position this? Of course you could take, you could take this tight line, but then you have the problem. How do we get back to the outside, right? How do we get back to the outside for the turn in? The problem is you already have to start braking here somewhere. And now the car is pointing towards the outside. You have to hit the brake and you have to rotate while braking at a very high speed. And the cars don't like that. And what's most likely going to happen is this. You spin. So what we're trying to do here, again, similar to the corner before, is what we're trying to straighten up the braking zone. So ideally, you go an even wider line here, just to be fully straight as you hit the brakes. Okay, the target is to be as straight as possible for the braking, because the car is very sensitive. The higher the speed gets, the more downforce is in effect. So we're going to slow it down here. This is where we're hitting the brake, and now we're going to have a tiny look from the outside. And then we're just going to roll it back in slow motion. So this is the car in neutral, so to say, and I just want to show you what is our gap to the ground on the rear and what is our gap on the ground at the front. And what I want you to have a look at is simply once I hit the brake here, you'll see the gap to the ground on the front is decreasing. The gap on the rear of the car is increasing. And the problem with that is, in general, okay, there's always more complexity to this, but in general, the closer the car is to the ground, the more downforce that end of the car is going to produce. So as you hit the brake at 250, suddenly there's going to be, 50, 100, 150 extra kilos, whatever, right? The number's made up. Whatever extra kilos, you'll have a lot of more downforce on the front. The problem is the opposite happens at the rear. You get a lot less downforce suddenly with the rear going up in the air. And that suddenly means you get a drastic imbalance in the car, right? We've set the car up to have certain amount of downforce in various situations. And suddenly you go into this situation, you hit the brake hard at 250 and you have a lot more downforce on the front, a lot less on the rear. Already this setup I used for this license run is, let's say, as stable as you can almost build it, okay? It's not going to rise as much on the braking on the rear. It's not going to dive as much on the front under braking. So this effect with the aggressive setups, it's going to be even more pronounced. But still, even with a setup that's dialed in more safely, this effect is still there, and we have to kind of drive around that. I should put my hands up here. I'm arguing with the hands down here all the time. So because we have this effect, suddenly more downforce on the front, less on the rear, the car has a huge capacity to rotate at that speed. And if you have to apply a lot of turning angle, then automatically you'll be in a situation where the car starts turning and spinning, just because that is how it works, because the difference in downforce levels is so drastic. So now you know that effect. And this is also, I think, where a lot of beginners might be confused. A car in slow speed situations, say up to 100, 120 or something, is going to behave very different than a car is behaving that is driving 200. because from no downforce to high downforce is a huge difference in what the car is actually doing. And that's why you're confused. You're braking at 80 and the car is perfectly stable. And then you're braking at 200 and suddenly the car is super unstable. So just being aware of these effects, you're essentially driving around with two different cars, right? One is a slow speed car, the other is a high speed car, and they can behave fundamentally different. So just keep that in mind in general. And the way to drive around that, as I said, just take a wide swing here to straighten up the braking zone, and you'll have much less problems with the next corner. Braking point wise, I feel this is something I do by feel here in the cockpit, really. So we're approaching that, taking the wide line here, and then it's really where the ideal line starts being more prominent again. There is, well, the lighting isn't the best here, but I feel like there's a line across the track here somewhere where the ideal line gets more dark again. Maybe we can see it from the outside. Somewhat. When we zoom out a lot, I think we can see it. It's a bit brighter here, and then it gets darker again here or something, somewhere there. But let's say you're pretty much braking when the previous corner ends. So you could say it's, well, where the white line is, right? So you could look to the left, you could look to the right, there is going to be a white stripe on the ground, which is likely your latest braking point. For beginners, of course, recommendation is to do that a bit earlier. You see the white stripe here, white stripe there. And that should give you a good starting point to where to apply the brakes, and maybe do it a bit earlier as I do, of course. Then try to go straight here. And then as you start going for that corner, you have to release the brake more and more and more, just to free that grip up on the front tires. Again, we use a lot of curb here. We're gonna roll it back in the outside camera just for you to see how much there is again. And you can pretty much, as all other curbs here on that track, you wanna climb that entirely. And potentially the curb causes a bit of issues, then you want to be on throttle slightly to stabilize the car. But I think the way I've set up the car here, this should not be a problem. Same thing on the exit, going very wide here. You can go across the white line entirely, just have to stay somewhat on the curb with the right side tires. That's still going to be valid. Again, a nice marker here with a 50-meter board respectively line, and in the cockpit, probably as long as you still comfortably see it, that should be your braking marker for the corner into the last section. And in the last section, we have again chosen to kind of portray this as a unit, because however you take that fast right-hander is going to influence your braking point for that one, and the speed through this one is going to influence how quickly you can reposition for this left-hander here, which is almost flat. You can probably take it flat with a more aggressive setup, but we have the same issue again like we had earlier between turn 4, 5, and 6, where the repositioning is key, right? So you want to be very aggressive with the repositioning to be very fast through the left-hander, and once we get that done, there is a lot of lap time left here. How do we do this? Again, the trail braking is going to be very essential here. We're going to be really slow. I'm never going 100% there for the braking even. If we look at this part here, just initially quite high in the brake, but never really 100%, always trailing somewhat because we're always already asking the car to rotate as well. And then the next key information will be we're gonna clip the curb here as much as we can, and we get the same effects that we had earlier with other curbs in turn 7, where the banking changes, the slope changes, and the curb kind of pulls you a bit to the inside. So the more you clip the curb, the better it will become, because it kind of pulls the car in, gives you additional rotation. On throttle then here, with TC3, you shouldn't have any worries. Don't be too aggressive, because the more power you add, the more it's going to take away. So give the car some room and try not to go all the way to the outside here, right? Leave a bit of room just so you have enough time to reposition, and you really have to be aggressive here. Don't be lazy in this situation. You have to reposition really, really fast, because else you're not going to be in this position here for the turn into the left. And maybe some of you will be in this position with the car, that corner of the car being on that curb, but all the other tires being in a different spot and your car essentially driving that direction still. So you now have, if we draw this line, you suddenly have an additional angle of rotation still to do, and then you are not making this corner as fast as I am. So it's really key on turn in to already be parallel with the curb on the outside here, right? So center line of the car is pretty much parallel with the outside curb. Make sure to transition early and transition aggressively after the corner before. This is the target here. Like, never stop repositioning. That's the information you want to take away from that one here. And it's going to be a payoff on a lot of other tracks. Never pause. Okay, if we zoom out here. Oh my God, what have I done? If we zoom out here, right, it seems like there is a huge amount of track available and there's plenty of time to reposition, but there really isn't. This is really a short straight, and you really want to position aggressively here, as aggressive as you can, to have a nice entry cut across all the curb there. This repositioning, this is where people are lazy. And if you're just ever so slightly lazy and you take your time and you come over just late here, your life is going to be miserable through this left-hander. You're going to have to lift a lot, maybe even brake, lose a lot of speed and lap time, right? So the repositioning, get it done early, get it done quickly. Without, like, the only bit I want to add here is if you're too aggressive, if you do it like this, right, then here in this phase, you're going to have a lot of TC intervention, because the car's like, well, what do you want? Accelerate or turn? Choose, right? So we have to stretch this out a bit in line with what the traction control allows. And let's say you want to be over to the right side here, either white line or where the green curb starts, right? Let's set that marker in your brain. This is where you want to be ready pretty much for turning into the left-hander, okay? This is where you want to be on the right again. Back to the outside, and then you'll have the same thing as we had earlier in turn 6. Do the turn in, see how the speed works out, and if you need more rotation, a bit of a lift here, that's going to start the rotation, bring your car further to the inside. And once you clip those sausages, you want to have the power down because it stabilizes the car. So as soon as you go for the inside here, the car is going to be destabilized by the sausages, but we're working against that by putting the power down. Nice swing to the left here, back onto the outside curb if you can. It's probably not relevant for you because then you have to do a weight transfer in the braking. Maybe just stay on the track, right? Don't make your life harder than it needs to be. 50-meter board, probably a good marker, but realistically, if we go backwards, you see the brake is applied much earlier already, right? Here's where the braking already starts. In the cockpit, it always feels like it's much later. But yeah, I'm starting to press the brake just when, say, the white curb here starts on the right. That's when you want to put the brakes down. Latest, the absolute latest. And then here in that corner, a lot of curb. Again, a bit of rolling happening as well. Let's zoom into the data here. And that's one of the corners where we are not really having to drag the brakes until we apply the power. There can be a bit of coasting where we use neither pedal. So initially just get rid of the speed, let the car roll into the corner. And once we're on the inside curb here, when you've made it there, that is your reference point, your trigger point to put the power down. And just because of how the SM works in particular here and how the situation is with the downforce and the setup and all that, you want to be aggressive with the power because, again, you'll see the turbocharger needs quite some time to actually release that power. So you definitely go through a situation where you might have a bit of understeer if you are not aggressive with the throttle. General rule of thumb, the faster you go, the more aggressive with the throttle you can be, because the more stable the car is going to be from downforce already, for example. And now I think I should have planted a lot of ideas into your head. So now I'll, I guess, remove myself from the picture and give you the whole lap, full speed, just to watch for yourself. And then I thank you all for watching this guide one more time. I'll put the link to the data pack in the description. and I wish you a lot of fun on LFM and a quick license run. So bye guys, see you very soon.